any rate, this is a natural point of departure.
Oh, is it going again?
Yeah, I think we need to get you some gaffers
Or
tape
something,
whatever
yeah.
it is. All right, on April 18th of this year, as you all know, Kenneth Phillip shot his former wife, Violeta Isackov, to death with 3 shots from a Winchester 12-gauge pump shotgun. That crime, of course, occurred in Feasterville in Lower Southampton Township. Immediately upon those events happening, various citizens observed various parts of the event, and of course he drove off, and they observed the vehicle in which he drove off and got its license number. An alert was broadcast on police radio, and Officer Friel of the Northampton Township Police Department actually made a loop from his patrol to look for that vehicle, and he spotted the Lincoln automobile which Mr. Phillip was driving. He began to follow it. Mr. Friel took evasive action. The officer continued to follow. Then Phillip stopped his vehicle on Buck Road and got out of the car with the shotgun, which he had reloaded, and before the officer could alight from his vehicle, fired a shot into the windshield. The officer was initially caught in his seatbelt, returned fire with his left hand out the window, then managed to get out of his vehicle. Phillip advanced, fired 2 more shots from the shotgun. The officer stood his ground, sheltered behind the door of the police vehicle, and continued to return fire. Phillip got back into the vehicle to reload. At that point, the officer fired a number of times into the rear of the vehicle and through the relatively small rear window. It's one of those cars with sort of a phony convertible roof on it, so that the rear window is somewhat smaller than normal, but at any rate, during the course of that firing, Officer Friel succeeded in fatally wounding Mr. Phillip. Other police arrived. I think the first on the scene were some officers from the Lower Southampton Police Department, and it was determined that Mr. Phillip was dead. Now, in terms of why we're here this morning, in each shooting in which any police department is involved, it is the job of the district attorney's office and the county detectives to investigate that shooting and to make a determination as to the propriety of that shooting, or in the alternative, whether some prosecutorial action is involved. It is plain under these circumstances that Officer Friel's actions were entirely justified. So it goes without saying that certainly he will not be the subject of any prosecution. In fact, I would suggest that the officer is to be commended. I think the thought of having a load of birdshot strike the windscreen directly in front of you is more like something out of World War II aerial combat than what most of our police officers expect to face on a day-to-day basis. He stood fast. He did not retreat around the car. He sheltered, returned fire, and in an environment in which there were a number of other vehicles around, this was more or less rush hour, he succeeded as quickly as possible in ending the threat to not only his own life but to the public, which Mr. Phillip represented. And I will make an observation, and we've had various discussions over time. Some of you are more familiar with firearms than others, but I think those of you who are familiar with shotguns and the various loads which are used in shotguns recognize that we are extremely fortunate that Mr. Phillip didn't much know what he was doing, it would appear, or didn't care. because number one, the pump shotguns have what they call a plug, which is there because hunting regulations generally limit to 3 rounds the number of rounds you can have at one time in a shotgun when you're hunting migratory birds or pheasant or whatever. That plug was still in. Had it been removed, it's very simple to remove it. He'd have had at least another 2 rounds capacity, which he could have placed in the gun before having to reload. In each of the cases, in his shooting of Ms. Isackov and his shooting at the police officer, he fired 3 rounds, and then that was it. He was out of ammunition until he reloaded. That need not have been the case if he knew what he was doing. It had at least another 2 rounds, and of course, most fortunately, he used a light target load of size 8 shot, which is about as fine as you get. It's something you'd use for hunting doves or quail, and a relatively low amount of propellant behind it. I think we are all extremely fortunate that had he been using even the kind of load you'd use on turkey, let's say, of larger BBs and a heavier powder charge, let alone buckshot, that might have penetrated the windscreen, and we might have been dealing with a different situation altogether. So, fortunately, he used a light load, and the officer was able to return fire and ultimately kill him. One of the questions about which there's been considerable speculation is where this shotgun came from, and I note Ms. Chevalier, who has called me on a more or less daily, not hardly daily, but at least every other day or so. The shotgun was something that was in the family. It was purchased by Mr. Phillips' father at the Kmart in Feasterville on July 7th, 1981. So that it was not, there was not any kind of breakdown in the Insta-check system. Mr. Phillips certainly was the subject of a protection from abuse order, which had been in standing for some time. And I would commend to you, I obtained a transcript, and I'd certainly be happy to share it after the conference, but Judge Gibbons presided at the initial issuance of the protection from abuse order. It was actually an agreed order entered by the 2 parties, and she questioned Mr. Phillip closely about the location of this shotgun. There had been previous interactions with police, and we can get into those if I brought our office's files along if you want to, but the Northampton police had searched the residence on at least one occasion and had retrieved a number of firearms, hadn't included this particular Winchester shotgun. There was questioning about, well, is there another shotgun out there? Mr. Phillip swore up and down that there was not, and that was largely corroborated by the fact that the police had, at that time, not too long before, searched his home and seized weapons, including at least one deer rifle, and I think one other shotgun, but had not found any other weapons there. We are not able to establish with investigation to date exactly where this shotgun was immediately prior to this incident where Mr. Phillip got it from. It may have been in the hands of one or other family members. Nobody is clear at this point as to where it may have been, but obviously it was accessible to him, and he retrieved it at some juncture in these events before using it as he did on the 18th. Another aspect about which there has been speculation and discussion is whether Ms. Isackov was aware, obviously she was aware, number one, that Mr. Phillip had been released from the Bucks County Correctional Facility That would have appeared to have been back on the April the 2nd when bail was posted on the PFA. He had been previously sentenced on the newest of his offenses, and there had actually, although it's not clear that it would have been served upon him by the time of these events, but the Office of Probation and Parole had applied to the court for a hearing on the violation on the first. He essentially received 2 probationary sentences arising from incidents that at least loosely arose from the relationship between the parties. Actually, the first probationary sentence involved resisting a conviction after jury trial, in which, ironically, Ms. Isackov and her daughters testified in his behalf, but my people won it anyway, and that was on resisting arrest with regard to the Northampton police in an incident in which they had been caused to come to the residence, at that time the joint residence, because of an abandoned 911 call. So Judge Gibbons exercised particular care in attempting to, with Ms. Isackov there, attempting to determine whether there was another shotgun round, where it might have been, and everybody said they didn't know where the thing was, and he disavowed, of course, any knowledge of it.